The morning of my son's graduation felt like sunlight after years of storms. I pressed his gown, straightened his cap, and reminded myself this was his moment, not mine. Still, I couldn't help feeling proud. I had worked 2 jobs, skipped meals, and sold jewelry just to make sure this day came true. When we arrived at the hall, the air buzzed with laughter, hugs, and flashing cameras. Families gathered in groups, proud parents bragging about sacrifices. I smiled quietly, my heart full. Then, I saw him, my ex-husband, standing tall, shaking hands, acting like a hero. His cold eyes caught mine, and I knew trouble was coming. He always loved taking the spotlight. Today, it seemed, he planned to use it to crush me. But what he didn't know was that I had come prepared with something he could never silence. If you like our revenge stories, please subscribe for more. We drop powerful news stories every week, filled with truth, emotion, and justice. Don't miss the next one. And remember, some stories hurt, but they heal too. Subscribe now, and join the journey. The ceremony hadn't even started, yet I felt the weight of his presence pressing against me. My ex-husband, Martin, always knew how to command attention. He wore his finest suit, polished shoes, and that same smug smile I remembered from our marriage. He greeted relatives, shook hands with old friends, and leaned in to whisper about how hard he had worked to put our son through school. I stood quietly in the corner, clutching the small program in my hands. No one knew the truth, that I had been the one staying up late, making lunches, and wiring tuition money when deadlines loomed. He hadn't written a single check. Still, everyone nodded at his words, admiring his sacrifices. When his sister approached me, she said, "You must be proud of Martin. He did so much for your boy." Her tone stung. I wanted to scream the truth, but I held my tongue. My son's big day wasn't the moment to argue. Or so I thought. Because deep down, I knew Martin wouldn't stop at whispers. He would find a stage, and when he did, he would drag my name through the dirt. And that's when I'd answer. I tried to focus on the ceremony, on the rows of proud families filling the hall, but the whispers kept chasing me. Martin was weaving his story with skill, speaking just loud enough for people to overhear. He carried the weight of it all, one woman murmured to another. Without him, their son wouldn't have made it this far, someone else replied. Every word felt like a blade twisting deeper. I wanted to grab their hands, show them the proof, the receipts, the bank records that lived in my bag. But I stayed silent, watching as Martin's performance grew bolder. He clapped harder than anyone, laughed louder, leaned closer to old friends as if they were sharing inside jokes about his sacrifices. My son hadn't noticed yet. He was too busy with classmates, taking photos, his face glowing with excitement. I forced a smile when he looked my way, unwilling to dim his joy. But in the shadows of that crowded room, resentment simmered. Martin had turned my years of sacrifice into his own applause. If you like our revenge stories, please subscribe for more. We drop powerful news stories every week, filled with truth, emotion, and justice. Don't miss the next one. And remember, some stories hurt, but they heal too. Subscribe now, and join the journey. I knew this wasn't the end of it. He wasn't just satisfied with whispers. He wanted a spotlight. And once he took it, the truth would follow. The auditorium lights dimmed as the ceremony began. Rows of graduates in black gowns filed onto the stage, caps bobbing with each step. My son walked tall, shoulders squared, his smile wide enough to brighten the room. My chest swelled with pride. For that moment, the bitterness melted. This was what I had fought for, his chance to shine. The dean spoke of perseverance, sacrifice, and the value of education. Applause echoed after every line, but my eyes stayed on my son. I remembered late nights tutoring him after my shift, sewing his torn uniforms, and staying awake when he studied past midnight. Martin sat in the front row, his posture stiff and commanding, as though this ceremony were his coronation. He leaned forward, whispering to the family beside him, no doubt taking credit again. When my son's name was called, my hands shook as I clapped. Cameras flashed, cheers erupted, and my boy accepted his diploma with grace. He scanned the crowd, and when his eyes found mine, I saw gratitude sparkle there. I thought maybe the day would pass peacefully. But then Martin stood, brushing his suit as though preparing for a performance. My heart sank. The dean had just finished announcing the last names when Martin rose from his seat. He didn't wait for permission, didn't care that this wasn't his stage. He stepped forward, clearing his throat, and soon all eyes shifted toward him. My stomach tightened. "I'd just like to say a few words about my son," Martin began, voice steady, proud. "None of this would have been possible without sacrifice. I worked day and night to ensure he had every opportunity. I carried this family when no one else could." A ripple of applause followed. He raised his hand for silence, then delivered the blow. And while some people in this room were nothing but leeches, draining without giving, I was the one building a future. Gasps filled the air. Heads turned toward me. My cheeks burned as whispers spread. Leech. That word hung heavy, pressing against my chest. I gripped the program in my hands, nails digging into the paper. My son froze on stage, confusion clouding his proud expression. He looked from his father to me, unsure what to believe. Martin smiled, smug and satisfied. He thought he had won. But he didn't realize, his performance had just given me my cue. The word Leech echoed in my ears long after Martin stepped back into his seat. It rolled around the room, whispered by mouths too eager for gossip. I sat frozen, my heart pounding so hard I thought people could hear it. For years, I had kept my silence, letting him boast while I worked quietly in the shadows. But this was different. He had chosen the most important day of our son's life to humiliate me, to erase my sacrifices and paint me as nothing. I caught sight of my son's face, his joy replaced with hurt and confusion. That was when something shifted inside me. This wasn't about my pride anymore. It was about truth, about showing him who had truly stood in his corner all these years. I took a deep breath, forcing myself not to react too quickly. If I lashed out in anger, Martin would win. He thrived on chaos. No, I needed precision. I needed timing. My fingers brushed the edge of my handbag resting at my feet. Inside were the documents I had brought. Bank transfers, receipts, proof of every sacrifice I had made. Martin thought he had silenced me. He had just set the stage. As the audience clapped politely, I lowered my eyes to hide the sting of tears. The humiliation pressed down heavy, but I refused to let Martin see me break. He thrived on weakness. Instead, I breathed slowly, letting the anger sharpen into something else, resolve. I dabbed at my eyes with a tissue, making it seem like I was only moved by the ceremony. But inside, I was already arranging every step of my next move. The documents in my bag weren't just papers. They were years of truth carefully stored, bank slips showing my deposits, receipts from tuition payments, even emails with school staff. Every page told the real story of who paid the price for this graduation. My son kept glancing at me, his brows furrowed, searching for reassurance. I smiled faintly, nodding as though everything was fine. But I saw the uncertainty in his eyes. Martin's words had done damage, planting doubt where trust once lived. That couldn't be the memory my son carried from this day. No, I owed him more than silence. If Martin wanted to perform, then I would give the audience a show he would never forget, truth revealed with dignity, not rage. The ceremony ended, and the graduates poured off stage, hugging family, tossing caps, and laughing. The air was full of joy, except around me. I sat quietly, my bag heavy against my side, holding everything Martin prayed no one would ever see. Years of proof. Bank records showing my transfers directly to the university. Pay stubs from the cleaning job I took on weekends. Even the receipt from when I sold my grandmother's bracelet to cover one overdue tuition bill. Every sacrifice, documented. Every truth, undeniable. I hadn't planned to use them. I only carried them for myself, as a reminder that no matter what Martin said, I knew the truth. But when he called me a leech in front of everyone, he left me no choice. Nearby, I heard relatives praising Martin again, clapping him on the back, telling him what a devoted father he was. Each false word made my grip tighten on the bag. My son walked toward us, his smile thinner now, shadowed by doubt. I could see the questions in his eyes. This was the moment I realized, silence was no longer protection. Silence was surrender. And I wasn't surrendering anymore. As I waited for the right moment, my mind drifted back through the years that had led us here. Nights of exhaustion blurred together, me folding laundry at midnight after double shifts, packing lunches before dawn, whispering prayers that the lights wouldn't be cut off before payday. I remembered the day my son begged me not to quit, even when the bills piled high. "Mom, don't give up," he said, his small hand resting on mine. That memory alone had carried me through nights when hunger gnawed and hope thinned. Martin hadn't been there for those moments. He wasn't awake when our son cried over failing grades, and he wasn't the one tutoring him until the tears stopped. Martin only appeared for birthdays, photo days, and holidays, moments when applause was guaranteed. Now he stood tall, basking in stolen glory. But I had lived the truth, and that truth burned in my chest. I looked at my son, who now towered taller than me, the boy I had raised with sweat and sacrifice. He deserved to know who had truly carried him here. The crowd thought Martin was the hero. Soon, they'd discover the real story, and the real sacrifice. Martin thrived in the center of every circle. After the ceremony, he moved smoothly from group to group, laughing, shaking hands, telling the same story. "I worked myself to the bone," he said proudly. "Paid every cent of tuition. I sacrificed everything for my boy." Heads nodded, impressed. Some even clapped him on the shoulder, praising his devotion. I stood a few feet away, invisible, listening to his lies spreading like wildfire. It was as if my years of sweat and sacrifice had been erased by his confident voice. One aunt leaned over and whispered, "You're lucky Martin carried all that. Not every father would." I bit my lips so hard I tasted blood. Lucky? If only they knew how many nights I'd gone without dinner so my son could eat. If only they knew about the extra shifts, the bills I juggled, the jewelry pawned in desperation. Martin caught my gaze across the room, his smirk widening. He thought he had won. He thought the story was his forever. But I had something he didn't, proof. Truth. And when I chose to speak, his perfect performance would crumble to dust before everyone he had fooled. My son finally broke free from his classmates and joined us. His face glowed with pride, but I caught the flicker of hesitation in his eyes. He hugged Martin first, and Martin made sure everyone saw it, patting his back like a conquering hero. Then my son turned to me. His smile faltered. "Mom," he said softly, "is it true? Did Dad really pay for everything?" The question pierced deeper than any insult. Doubt had already taken root. I felt my throat tighten, but I steadied myself. This was what Martin wanted, to wedge a crack between us, to make my son question me on the most important day of his life. I placed my hands gently on my son's shoulders. "Look at me," I whispered. "You know who was there. Who made the meals. Who stayed up late." He looked away, torn, eyes darting between us. Martin's smug grin widened, confident he had won the battle. But this wasn't a battle of words. This was a war of truth. And truth has its own timing. I squeezed my son's hand. "Don't believe everything you hear today. Soon, you'll see what's real." His confusion deepened, but so did my resolve. I stepped aside, my son still caught in confusion. Just then, I felt a hand on my arm. It was my oldest friend, Carla, who had been quietly watching everything unfold. Her eyes burned with the kind of anger only loyalty carries. "Juliana," she whispered firmly, "you can't let him do this. Not today." I swallowed hard. If I fight him now, won't it ruin my son's day? Carla shook her head. He already ruined it. Look at your boy, he's doubting the one person who carried him all these years. If you don't speak, Martin wins. And your son deserves the truth more than anyone. Her words hit me like a bolt of clarity. She was right. Silence wasn't protecting my son, it was betraying him. The documents in my bag suddenly felt heavier, almost alive, urging me to use them. Carla leaned closer. You don't need to scream. Just show them. Let the truth speak. I took a deep breath, my hands trembling. Around us, Martin continued entertaining relatives, basking in stolen praise. But the clock was ticking. My son needed to know. The world needed to know. And for the first time that day, I was ready. Martin was surrounded by relatives, his voice booming as he retold the same lie. I carried it all. Every bill, every tuition payment, me, and me alone. They laughed and nodded, hanging on to every word. I stepped forward, my heels clicking against the polished floor. My son stood nearby, eyes following me, uncertain but curious. Martin's smirk widened when he saw me approach. Something you'd like to add, Juliana? He asked loudly, as though daring me. Or are you just here to listen like always? Gasps rippled through the crowd. He wanted to humiliate me again, to box me in with his charm and confidence. I inhaled slowly, steadying my voice. Actually, Martin, I said clearly, I do have something to add. If you're going to speak of sacrifice, let's make sure everyone hears the truth. The room fell silent. Guests leaned in, whispers dying on their lips. Martin tilted his head, mocking. And what truth would that be? I placed my handbag on the table beside me, unzipping it with deliberate care. My son's eyes widened as I pulled out the neatly stacked folder. This truth, I said, my voice firm. The one you can't erase with lies. The air grew heavy as I laid the folder on the table. People shifted closer, curiosity flickering in their eyes. My son leaned in, his face pale, searching for answers. Martin laughed, that sharp, dismissive sound he always used when cornered. What's this? He sneered. Old grocery receipts? Don't embarrass yourself, Juliana. I met his gaze steadily. These aren't groceries, Martin. These are years of tuition payments. Rent deposits. Medical bills. Every cent I sacrificed so our son could stand here today. Gasps rippled through the crowd. A few relatives craned their necks to see the papers. Others whispered, their smiles fading as the story they believed began to crack. My son reached for the folder, flipping through the documents. His brow furrowed deeper with each page. Mom, this is all from you? He asked softly. Martin's smirk faltered. He tried to laugh it off, but his voice wavered. She's exaggerating. No, I cut in firmly. I stayed silent for years, letting you play the hero. But today, in front of everyone, the truth finally belongs to me. The room hushed. Martin shifted uncomfortably, for the first time losing control of the spotlight. And I wasn't finished yet. I lifted one sheet from the folder, my hands steady now. This, I said clearly, holding it up, is the bank transfer for the first semester's tuition. My name, my account, my sacrifice. I placed it on the table for all to see, then pulled another. And this is when I sold my grandmother's bracelet to cover a late fee. Here's the pawn ticket. Here's the deposit. Whispers filled the room. Faces turned from Martin to me, doubt spreading like wildfire. My son stared, his lips parted, eyes darting between the pages. I laid down more papers, pay stubs from double shifts, receipts from meal plans, even the letter thanking me for my donations to the scholarship fund. Each page was a stone laid on the truth's foundation, heavy enough to crush Martin's lies. Martin's voice cracked as he barked, "This doesn't prove anything. I supported you." "No," I cut him off, my voice strong. You supported yourself. Your pride. Your ego. But not your son. Silence hung in the air. Martin's mask began to slip, sweat glistening at his temples. And in that silence, for the first time in years, I felt power return to me. I spread more papers across the table like pieces of a puzzle. Here's when I worked weekends cleaning offices. Every dollar went into his tuition. Here's the receipt from the night I skipped paying the electric bill so the university fees wouldn't be late. And here's the letter I wrote begging for an extension when I had nothing left. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The relatives who once praised Martin now exchanged uneasy looks. My son's hands trembled as he picked up each paper, his eyes filling with disbelief. I had no idea, he whispered. I smiled softly at him. You weren't supposed to. I wanted you to focus on your studies, not my struggles. Martin tried to speak, but his words faltered. She's twisting things. No, I said firmly. The truth doesn't twist, Martin. The truth stands. The room was silent except for my son's sharp inhale. He looked from me to his father, realization dawning with every breath. And then, in front of everyone, he whispered the words I had been waiting years to hear. You were the one, Mom. You carried me here. Martin's face turned pale. His lies were finally collapsing. Martin's smirk evaporated. His confident posture crumpled like a house of cards in a storm. For the first time that day, he looked small, powerless in front of the crowd he had once captivated. He opened his mouth, then closed it. Tried to speak, but no words came. The receipts, bank statements, and letters lay before everyone, a trail of undeniable truth. His years of boasting, of painting himself as the hero, were shattered by paper and proof. Guests whispered among themselves, exchanging shocked glances. Some shook their heads, unable to believe what they were seeing. The relatives who had clapped him on the shoulder now avoided his eyes. Martin's pride, so carefully curated, crumbled in real time. My son stood beside me, holding my hand tightly, eyes wide with admiration and gratitude. Mom. I had no idea, he murmured, voice thick with emotion. I squeezed his hand, smiling gently. You don't have to, not until now. What matters is that you see the truth today, and everyone else sees it too. Martin slumped into his chair, defeated. His empire of lies had fallen in a matter of minutes. And in that silence, I felt a deep satisfaction. Justice had arrived, calm and undeniable. My son's eyes shimmered with unshed tears as he continued to flip through the documents. Each page told a story of sleepless nights, hard work, and sacrifices he had never known. He looked up. Every single day, my love. Every day I made sure you had what you needed, even if it meant I went without. A murmur ran through the crowd. People leaned in, absorbing the weight of my words. Martin tried to interject, opening his mouth to refute, but his voice faltered under the evidence. Tears spilled down my son's cheeks as he hugged me tightly. I thought Dad did everything, he whispered. I didn't realize, it was you. The audience watched silently, the air thick with disbelief and respect. My son's acknowledgement was louder than any words I could have spoken. It was truth made visible. I patted his back, whispering, "It's okay. Now you know, and everyone else does too." Martin slumped further in his chair, humiliated before family, friends, and strangers alike. For the first time, his dominance had failed. The room buzzed with disbelief. Whispers rippled through the crowd, growing louder with every new document I revealed. Faces that had admired Martin now stared in shock, some even stepping back in disbelief. He did all this? All these years, one guest whispered. I can't believe it, another murmured, shaking their head. Martin's face turned red, then pale, as he tried to regain control. He opened his mouth, his voice cracking, "That's not." But no one listened. The evidence was undeniable. Each receipt, each bank transfer, each letter of proof told the same story. Martin had taken credit for sacrifices he never made. My son's hand clutched mine tightly, grounding me in the moment. "Mom, everyone sees it now," he said, tears still glistening. I nodded, glancing around at the guests. Some looked embarrassed for having praised Martin, others gave sympathetic nods to me. The shift in energy was palpable. For the first time, Martin wasn't the center of admiration. The spotlight had moved, and truth illuminated every corner of the room. I stood tall, calm, and proud, knowing the humiliation he had planned for me had turned entirely against him. I took a deep breath, feeling the room's tension settle around me. Martin's face was pale, lips pressed tight, every muscle in his body rigid with disbelief. The crowd had shifted, their admiration for him had crumbled, replaced by quiet respect for the one he had tried to humiliate. I smiled gently, keeping my voice calm. "Martin," I said, "you called me a leech, accused me of taking without giving, and tried to destroy my reputation in front of our son and everyone here. But look at the proof. I gave everything so he could stand here today. Every dollar, every hour, every sacrifice, I did it all quietly, without applause or credit. And now, everyone can see it." The audience leaned in, hanging on every word. My son's eyes glistened, and a few guests whispered in awe. Martin opened his mouth, but no sound came. I paused, letting the weight of my words sink in. Leeches don't carry, they drain. I carried. I sacrificed. I loved. And today, the truth is clear. Silence followed. The calm, measured delivery of my truth was far stronger than any shout or anger could have been. Martin had lost. Elegantly. Poetically. Completely. Martin sank into his chair, defeated. The once confident man who had commanded attention and admiration was now invisible in the room. Relatives avoided his gaze, friends whispered behind their hands. The crowd no longer hung on his words, they had turned, eyes fixed on me, listening to the truth of what I had carried all these years. He shifted uncomfortably, trying to find footing, trying to reclaim the spotlight, but the proof I laid out had cornered him completely. Every receipt, every bank transfer, every note of sacrifice left him powerless. My son stood beside me, holding my hand firmly. "Mom. I never knew," he said softly, voice choked with emotion. Guests nodded and murmured in agreement, their respect clear. Martin's isolation grew with each passing second. He could no longer manipulate, no longer charm, no longer erase the truth. I met his eyes calmly, a quiet triumph in my gaze. "This is the moment you learn, Martin," I said. "Words don't make heroes. Sacrifices do. And today, everyone sees who truly cared for our son." He slumped further, a man surrounded by people yet entirely alone. His empire of lies had crumbled. And I finally felt peace. My son turned toward the crowd, holding my hand tightly. "Everyone," he began, voice steady but emotional, "I need to say something important. Today is my graduation, a day I've dreamed of my entire life. But the person who made this possible isn't who you think." Heads turned, guests leaning in. Martin's smirk had vanished, replaced by disbelief. "This woman," my son continued, gesturing to me, "my mother, Juliana G., sacrificed everything for me. Nights she stayed awake helping me study. Weeks she worked extra shifts so I could pay tuition. Days she went without so I could have food, books, and opportunities she never asked for in return. She is the reason I'm standing here today." A wave of applause rolled through the room. Some guests wiped their eyes, others stood, nodding in recognition. Martin's face fell further, lips pressed tight as the admiration shifted entirely toward me. I squeezed my son's hand, pride swelling in my chest. "Thank you, Mom," he whispered, and the sound carried over the crowd. Martin tried to speak, but no one paid him attention. For the first time, his carefully built persona of heroism had vanished completely. The truth had spoken louder than any lie. The applause grew louder, filling the entire hall. Hands clapped, voices cheered, and the room vibrated with acknowledgement. People who had admired Martin moments ago now turned to me, eyes wide with respect and admiration. Some guests stood, nodding in approval. Others whispered words of awe, murmuring about the sacrifices they had never known. Martin tried to interject, but no one listened. His voice was swallowed by the roar of recognition for the truth. My son hugged me tightly, his pride and love pouring into me. "I don't know how to thank you enough," he whispered. I smiled, pressing my cheek to his, feeling years of worry, effort, and quiet sacrifice dissolve in that single embrace. The audience's attention remained fixed on us. Friends and family, even strangers in the crowd, recognized the courage it took to stand there and reveal the truth so calmly and confidently. Martin sat alone, isolated in the middle of applause not meant for him. He had orchestrated humiliation for me, but the plan had backfired completely. In that moment, the standing ovation was more than celebration, it was justice. And I, Juliana G., finally felt the weight lift, replaced by respect, pride, and the quiet satisfaction of truth triumphing. The ceremony ended, but the hall still buzzed with conversation. People approached me with congratulations, shaking my hand, offering smiles filled with respect. For the first time in years, I felt truly seen, not as a Leech, but as the woman who had carried her family with quiet strength. My son stayed close, his arm around mine. "Mom, you showed everyone who you really are," he said, voice full of admiration. I smiled, squeezing his hand. "I just made sure the truth was seen, honey. That's all anyone needs to know." Martin lingered behind, shoulders slumped, the smugness replaced by shame. I didn't look back. There was nothing left to say. The humiliation he had tried to inflict on me had turned entirely against him. With each step toward the exit, I felt lighter, freer. The crowd parted politely, offering nods and murmured praises as we walked by. I held my head high, proud not only of my son's achievement but of the dignity I had maintained while reclaiming the truth. Today wasn't just his victory, it was ours. And as we stepped into the sunlight, I knew the story of sacrifice, love, and truth would never be forgotten. The days after the graduation were quiet but filled with change. Family and friends who had witnessed the truth approached me, offering apologies, hugs, and words of admiration. Martin's reputation had crumbled, whispers followed him wherever he went, and invitations stopped coming. The pedestal he had built for himself was gone, replaced by the reality everyone could now see. My son and I spent hours reflecting on the day, talking about everything I had done for him. He expressed gratitude I had waited so long to hear publicly. "Mom," he said, tears glistening, "I'll never forget this. You did everything for me, even when I didn't know. I'll make sure everyone knows it too." I smiled, feeling a mix of relief, pride, and vindication. Years of quiet sacrifice, ridicule, and being called a Leech had finally been acknowledged. The public humiliation Martin had tried to inflict on me had turned into the exact opposite, a declaration of truth, courage, and love. For the first time in years, I felt completely at peace. The battle was over, my dignity intact, and my son's respect and admiration secured. The lesson was clear: truth and perseverance always outshine lies and arrogance. If this story moved you, don't forget to like the video, subscribe for more powerful narratives, and share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear what part hit you the hardest. Thanks for watching.